From a network of top secret, highly secure locations across South Texas, this is the Spurs Insider Podcast. I am your host, Mike Finger, joined by Express News Spurs beat writers Tom Orsborn and Jeff McDonald, along with Express News sports editor Nick Talbot. We are recording this after the conclusion of a road trip that went against the expectations of the podcast. That was followed by the final game of the road trip, which was the first game at home against the New York Knicks. That basically looked like a team at the end of a road trip. But we can get right into kind of the ways that the local Cagers defied expectations over the past week, starting with some pretty decent games on the West Coast, Jeff McDonald.
You want to start with the positivity today?
Yeah. Why not?
Are we wrapping up already? We just started. Yeah.
You were on the trip. What did you see?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe we were sandbagging a little, but when we convened to talk about the trip beforehand, I think all of us predicted an 0-for-3 trip, and the local Cagers. I guess we didn't really realize at the time exactly the disarray the Portland Trailblazers were in, but the local Cagers annihilated the Blazers, and then turned around and beat Steph Curry and company at home at the Center, and played pretty well in Phoenix. Lost the game, but played pretty well. I think if you had gone to that trip and said they're going to go 2-1, I think you would have taken that in a New York minute. So. Good trip. They're kind of learning to play on the road, learning to win on the road. The Golden State game was another one, like the Boston game where they had a big lead, blew a big lead, and then they were the team that made the plays down the stretch to, seal the game. And the difference here is that this one was on the road. Like they went into a pretty hostile environment there in San Francisco. Had the crowd working against them, pulled out a game in the final minutes. That they might. I don't think they win that game in October. I think if you're looking for signs of growth in this team, those kind of late game moments where they're actually getting some stuff accomplished is a sign of how far they've come since the beginning of the season.
They got the GM in Portland fired right before that, which I thought was interesting. Like that's how badly they beat him. And I realized that's sort of unrelated to it, but that's that was amusing that the Blazers really are in disarray in a lot of different ways. And it's sort of, I don't know if this is the right tangent to go on right now, but the Blazers are just an example of how you can just have everything fall apart in the NBA. Even when you think you've got the right pieces, I mean, you're building around Damian Lillard, which seems like a pretty good idea. And just a few bad decisions, and that Portland, the issues there are more complex than just a couple of bad decisions. I mean, there was some kind of internal dysfunction, to put it mildly, that led to all this. But I mean, the championship windows, and I'm not even sure Portland's was ever all the way open, but they're so fleeting in the NBA. And I know listeners get tired of hearing this, but it's just another example of how good the Spurs had it for so long to be able to compete for championships as long as they did during the Duncan era, when so many things have to go right. And the Blazers seem to be in a good position, and now it's just kind of a nightmare for them. So, I don't know where I was going there, but big picture wise for the Spurs, if we're talking about Blazers big picture, where do you see this rebuilding season so far for this team? Are they getting what they wanted out of 2021-22?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Mike, that, it underscores the need for patience, and that this is reality for this franchise. And, it was a long time coming, and that's something to be grateful for. But fans are fans, and they want it now. And you see progress, as Jeff said, winning on the road, taking care of a Portland team that was down, and then beating a Golden State team that was coming off the big win over Phoenix, although that might have worked against the Warriors, but still, as Pop said last night after the Knicks game, I forget what he said, happy as hell, or he's seeing great progress, or, he's just pleased with what's going on with their effort and, making these markers, these achievements here and there.
I mean, if you're talking big picture, building for the Spurs, like beyond this season, I mean, you're still at the point, who's your superstar going to be? Who's your next superstar going to be? Because in order to get back to the playoffs, you got to have a star. And maybe it's DeJounte Murray. Maybe that's something we're learning, that he does have that ceiling in him. But if it's not DeJounte, where are they going to get that star from? I think you've seen a lot of good development from guys that would be really top-notch rotation players, role players on a team going forward. Who's the next star is kind of the position the Spurs are in. Do you get that guy from the draft? Probably. Is he a guy that's already on your roster? Maybe. So I think that's sort of the next kind of big picture step you're looking at. And like I said, maybe it's DeJounte. He showed us a lot this year already. A lot of growth. And he's a guy that if he was playing this well on a team that was, firmly in the playoff hunt, I think we'd be talking about this guy as a potential all-star.
I'm going to quibble a little bit with the semantics.
Okay.
Even though I think we're sort of on the same page here, I think you mentioned something about you need a superstar to make the playoffs. I don't think that's true, because I don't think there's 16 superstars in the league.
All right. Well, it depends on your suit. Yeah. But you need a star. Like Memphis isn't getting there. Memphis isn't get there without Ja Morant. Like, you need that kind of guy at least to make the playoffs. Show me a playoff team that doesn't have a guy that is, a star.
Well, I think that, again, we're getting into some gray areas here about what constitutes a superstar, what doesn't, and whether we're like long term. I don't think the goal for this franchise is to get back to the playoffs. I think it's something higher than that. And I think that the team as constructed, your San Antonio Spurs, you keep this group together for a while, and it's probably a playoff team, even without DeJounte Murray becoming a quote unquote star. But I think we're on the same page here. If they want to be a contender, contending for the Western Conference, for top seeds there, for NBA titles, that's where you really need either DeJounte Murray to become a true star, a true superstar, or to find somebody else. And like DeJounte is playing really well. This is, when you're talking about percentile expectations of like what you hoped he would be when you drafted him, this is like he's reaching the 90th, maybe 95th percentile of what you thought that guy could be when he was the 20, whatever pick he was in that draft. But that next step to Ja Morant, to leading a contending playoff team, that's a pretty big one. And he might not ever make it. And that's not a failure if he doesn't. But I would just say right now, we're kind of talking about different questions. Do the San Antonio Spurs right now have a future superstar, like a slam dunk, all-star, all-NBA top player? I'm not sure that they do.
No, they don't. But if you go down to the next,
go ahead, Tom.
Well, if you go down to the next level, we've been talking two different things: superstar and star. Yeah, DeJounte has he's a rising star, I think. But superstar, no. Yeah.
He's not going to be Kawhi or Durant or LeBron.
Okay, let me change
I don't think anybody was really insinuating that, but he.
But I mean, there's different levels to that too. There's Devin Bookers, there's Donovan Mitchells, there's players like that aren't Kevin Durant and LeBron, but are kind of the lead dog on the on good teams. And maybe DeJounte can become that, but I'm not sure. I guess a better question to ask the group would be, with the way the younger players, really all the players other than like that young are young players on this team, with the way that they're developing this year, if you bring everybody back. You keep the band together, re-sign the younger guys, and we can talk more about like Lonnie Walker later. And just keep adding similar players over the next couple of years. Like my contention is it's probably a playoff team at some point. It's probably a 6, 7, 8 seed level team. Would you guys dispute that? Like in a couple of years, you keep bringing DeJounte Murray and Keldon Johnson and Derek White and Devin Vassell back, add similar type players without really hitting the home run lottery pick superstar in the draft. Like, does that seem like a realistic future for this team just to be kind of what the Portland Trailblazers have been over the past several years? Is that something that you see as feasible?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And I think DeJounte is going to continue to get better and better and better, and maybe reach that close to that star level that you defined, of a Booker, Mitchell. I think he has that potential.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes, but it also depends on what the West does. Kind of see a shift in the NBA this time. In the NBA for the first time, where the East is kind of stronger, which is shocking. If it stays the way it is right now, then yes. If it's loaded like it was 2 or 3 years ago, maybe they're the team that's almost there. The 9-10 guy. It also depends on growth of DeJounte Murray, if he's going to be that all-star, and you really want to see a second guy kind of up to that level. Is that going to be Devin Vassell? Is that going to be a kid that looked pretty good for 18 this week? Josh Primo. Primo. Yeah, we can do the Primo chance. Looked pretty good this weekend for an 18-year-old kid. I mean, that's in the limited minutes he gets, he looks pretty good. I'm sure Spurs fans are probably more excited than they should be, but that's just the way fandom works. But he looked pretty good, and it really depends on who that second or third option kind of grows to be, I think, on whether or not they're a contender like the Blazers were never the 1 or 2. They were always the 4 through 6 before this complete and utter fall apart that's happening for them right now. And the Spurs can be that, but I do think one of these guys kind of needs to join DeJounte on that level, where you're not a 10-time All-Star, but you might be a 2 to 3-time All-Star.
2 to 3-time All-Star, pretty lofty. Like, I'm not sure DeJounte Murray ever makes the team. And this is true.
But I mean, we're talking about this span of 10 years.
I can tell you I can go on the record right now. This team does not have 2 to 3-time All-Stars on it. It might not have one, but on the roster right now, there are not two players that are going to make 2 All-Star teams.
That's just because Jock Landale's in the G League.
And that could be 2. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But basically, they're doing kind of what they have to do. And you're not going to make the blockbuster trade because no small market team does that anymore. You cannot. It's a version of free agency. You don't trade for the superstar who doesn't want to be there. And the superstars that we've seen time and time again are flocking to the major markets. So you kind of just have to collect the assets like they've been doing. And, you didn't mention Keldon Johnson earlier. He can be, I think there's more to him. He can take that next step. I don't think he ever, I might be overly negative here, but I don't think he becomes a 2 to 3-time All-Star. Like, there's a lot left for him, but that's a high bar. Like, there's only so many All-Star spots. And it's just tough to make it. DeJounte Murray's averaging almost a triple-double. I'm not sure he makes the All-Star team this year. So I think... Yeah,
I wasn't arguing that he'd make it this year. I just arguing that he might make one because injuries happen and guys get put on the team.
It's hard to do. Like, Devin Booker took forever to make one.
Yeah, I mean, even look at Dame. I mean, and then he's a 6-time, and you think he could even be on several of those teams. Or look at DeMar. DeMar's probably, at that level where he should have made more teams because he's that good. He's certainly worthy this year before the entering the protocols. But
I think DeJounte Murray makes an all-star team. I do, especially if they get better. With what we're seeing from him now, if they do improve and if they're a winning team, I think he can make it. Not a lock, yeah, but I think it's the potential's there.
He's having a really good year.
Really good year.
Winning helps.
The
Winning really helps.
In Phoenix, the feeling was that everything was finally coming together. I think Spurs coach Greg Popovich mentioned this, and that all the starting guys were back healthy again. They were finally developing some kind of rhythm. And then in the New York game, back in the friendly confines of the AT&T Center, Keldon Johnson steps on Jakob Poeltl's foot. Despite reports that it was Drew Eubanks, it was Jakob Poeltl's foot.
I will not stand for the Eubanks libel.
I screwed that up. I misidentified the foot.
Public?
I did. I apologize. I apologize to the public. I apologize to you, Mike Finger. And I was wrong. It was Jakob Poeltl's tugboat-sized shoe that he stepped on. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that Derek White stepped on Jakob's foot also.
Yep.
And sidelined him for 12 games. Correct, Jeff?
I don't know the exact number of games, but that was Jakob's handiwork too.
So it's a danger zone in there with Jakob's destroyer-sized shoes, I should say.
The Austrian ankle breaker.
Yeah.
I just want to point out that the San Antonio Express News, the organization that Tom Orsborn represents, has been in business for more than a century, like dating back to the 1800s.
Post
spent
Civil
all
War.
that time.
Was that Pop's first year?
You can get it was early in Pop's reign. You can get all the Express News stuff at expressnews.com. Become a subscriber. There's Black Friday deals, I think, still available. Maybe they just expired, but you can always get a good deal. Sign up for the Spurs Nation newsletter, all that. But anyway, this organization has spent more than a century building up credibility and trust with our readers, with the people of South Texas, with the people of the whole country. And I just thought it was a bit disappointing for Tom Orsborn to recklessly tweet that, like, violate all that by recklessly tweeting that Keldon Johnson stepped on Drew Eubanks' foot. It was so disappointing to me.
It was a sleepless night, Mike. It was, and I had to listen to several self-help type podcasts from our podcast colleague to get through that night.
Yeah. But I mean, eventually you'll win everybody back, Tom. Like, it's going to take time after a mistake like that.
Oh, that was our Dewey defeats Truman moment, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could. Oh man. Yeah.
I want to invite the listeners to hear a little bit about what goes on behind the scenes at Spurs games, because it really was a fantastic moment. We were in a little room next to the Spurs locker room last night. They bring in a stoic Jakob Poeltl after a tough loss to the Knicks, and nobody's happy after losing. But he sits through the question, takes them. I asked him about Keldon Johnson stepping on his foot and injuring it, and Jakob said, I didn't even realize that he stepped on it. I just heard him screaming behind me, and he's very concerned about Keldon, what have you, and. So we go next door to after the interviews are over to go into the media workroom, and Tom very seriously comes up to me and says, "Mike, I didn't want to mention anything to you, but Jakob actually stepped on Drew Eubanks' foot."
Well, now you're messing up the story.
The word "actually" was never there. It was. But
Keldon stepped on someone's foot.
Keldon stepped on Drew Eubanks' foot.
That worm is turned.
But no,
Tom thought he was going to correct me when in fact he was the one who was hoisted on his own petard.
I apologize, Mike. And we go way back. And you've always made me a better reporter.
Oh, yes.
A better colleague and a better man. And I appreciate it. And I do apologize.
I think I was laying it on thick.
Yeah. I soiled all of our reputations, and I apologize.
But don't apologize to me. Apologize to Drew Eubanks.
I think we can overcome it. Drew Eubanks, I guess if we want to get into like rotation stuff, which can be highly overrated, especially on a team like this. I mean, what are we really arguing about? I think that, first of all, everything's been fine. Like, I have no major quibbles with anything, but like I'd also be fine with moving in a new direction. Like we don't need to see Drew Eubanks every night. We don't need to see him 20 minutes a night. Like sure, more Thad Young would be fine. More whoever would be fine. Like
on the road trip, on the road trip.
Long story short of my opinion on this is I'm not outraged about anything.
Right, but just to for the record, so everyone will hear it. On the road trip, Thad Young replaced Drew Eubanks as the backup center. He was the first big off the bench in all those games, and we didn't ask it last night. It kind of got lost in the shuffle, and I don't think any of us really care that much. But I wouldn't be surprised if the reason it was Eubanks over Thad last night was just second night of a back-to-back. And Thad's your oldest player, and Pop Pastor has a history of not going to those guys. But Drew was not used much on this road trip. So, it seemed like they were going in that direction and may still be going in that direction. But we'll see when the schedule gets a little, lighter here.
It's been no secret that, Thad has mentioned it going back a month to us in interviews about how, the unfortunate situation that he's been in. He's been very positive, as we've mentioned on the podcast a lot, but he's also minced no words about the fact that, this isn't what he expected when he came here. I think he's mentioned that lots of times over the past month or so. I still think that he's traded sooner than the trade deadline for sure. I'm not sure it's going to happen this week, but that's still kind of the position that the Spurs are in. I don't think that's changed at all. That they're going to move that guy. They've intended that since they made the trade for DeRozan. Or trade of DeRozan for Thad Young and the rest of that package. And, I guess there's a difference in theory, whether you play the guy that you want to trade or you keep him healthy to avoid having him to tear an ACL or whatever and then get nothing for him. But I think they're just kind of playing it right down the middle there. Yeah. I would not be surprised at all for him to end up being a Phoenix Sun or any other team that could use a guy like him.
And not to belabor the point, but I used the Google to look it up. But on this past road trip, Drew Eubanks played 4 minutes in Portland, was DNP at Golden State, 8 minutes against Phoenix. And in fact, the game against New York, he played 15 minutes on the second night of a back-to-back. It was his first outing playing double-digit minutes since November 22nd when the Spurs lost at home to Phoenix. So he's really kind of slid down the depth chart a little bit here over the last couple of weeks. And it's been more of a Thad Young show, just for the record, so we all know what we're talking about.
And with the way that the injuries have been sort of piling up here and there with this team over the past several weeks, like I can't think of they're basically playing who they need to play.
Yeah.
Jock Landale's going back to the G League, and I think you pointed this out. That's probably a good move that could have happened sooner, just to give him some playing time. I was thinking of
what made me think of that was listening to Josh Primo talk about what it was like for him. Josh had a really good game in Phoenix. Didn't score a lot, only took 2 shots, but defensively he looked like he knew what he was doing and where he was supposed to be and what the rotations were supposed to look like and places where he could gamble for a steal or places where he could be in the right place to make a block. And he wasn't really doing that in his earlier appearances. And when you talk to Josh, it was because he's saying, I had no idea about the scheme at all when I got here. I just got off the plane basically. And you go down to the G League and play and practice with those guys every day. Like you're not getting to play and practice at the NBA, and they're teaching you the Spurs system and the Spurs terminology and the Spurs scheme. And so when I came back up here, this is Primo talking and I'm paraphrasing a lot. When I came back up here, I had just a better idea of what I was doing and more confidence, and was able to make just more confident decisions, more confident judgments. And so I started to think, like, why isn't Jock Landale down there? Because his big deal is he missed all of his first NBA training camp basically with a concussion. And then he missed a huge chunk of time at the early part of the season where they actually had some practice time when he was in health and safety protocols. And as all of us know, NBA teams, when they get to this point of the season and beyond, barely practice. So there's no catch-up time for a guy like that who just showed up, doesn't really know the scheme, doesn't know the terminology really well, is basically just watching from the sidelines. There's not a lot of catch-up time if a rookie is going to miss training camp and a lot of time early. So I wondered why isn't he in Austin learning this stuff like Primo did? And apparently that Brian Wright and those guys can read my mind telepathically and made that call today. So I think it'll be a good move for him. I think it's actually a closer step towards him getting on the floor in the NBA than a step away from it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And on the Primo thing, talking to Pop before the New York game about sort of the plan for him, he made it pretty clear that Austin's still a big part of his future. And this was before Keldon got hurt. It seemed before the Knicks game that the minutes were sort of going to start drying up for Primo, like the minutes that were necessary that they needed him to play weren't going to be there like they were when he did play to sub in for Devin Vassell or whoever. So Pop basically said, yeah, we like the minutes that he gets with the Spurs, but the plan is definitely for him to go back and continue working the same way that DeJounte Murray and Derek White and Lonnie Walker and name the whole list did over the years. And that might change a little bit if the injuries linger for a while, but I would expect that he'd continue to split time at least until the G League season ends, and then be ready for a strong finish.
Yeah, I think he'll be in the G League for mostly for as long as that season is going on. People don't realize it ends in February. There's still like 2 months of NBA season left after that. And so I think the real accurate analog might be Keldon Johnson, who spent a lot of time in the G League his rookie year. But as soon as that ended, we saw him getting minutes up with the Spurs, starting about that rodeo trip that rookie season. Then, of course, COVID happened and Keldon broke out in the bubble. But the plan for Keldon back then was get through the G League season. If you perform well there, then we're going to give you minutes in the final couple months of the season at the NBA level. And I think Primo could probably follow the same sort of path. I think we'll see a lot of Primo games near the end of the season. That's just me guessing, but it seems logical to me.
That's another reason why I think there's a bit of a danger in overreacting to not only results early in the season, but the way minutes are distributed all up and down the line, because this team's going to look a lot different after the All-Star break than it does now. Thad Young will be gone. Zach Collins might finally be available, although considering his history, you never take anything for granted. Jock Landale could be ready to play. Josh Primo could be ready to play. Could be a completely different look. And this is something, obviously, that we'll monitor as the season progresses. But by the time we get to the end of the season, I wonder where the young man who we all like and enjoy and have great promise for, great expectations of, Lonnie Walker IV is going to fit in. And that might be one of the bigger questions for the second half of the season. And I'm not sure I have even a good guess right now. I have no clue. After watching him for however many years he's been around, we're still kind of waiting to figure out what he is. Do you guys know what he is yet?
No, and I don't think the Spurs do either. I mean, I think 1 minute he looks like a guy who can really help you and sometimes can just change a game for you. And then within the same game, he looks like a guy that you might not be able to play for a while. So he's just one of the most confounding players that I've seen in a Spurs uniform, to be honest with you. I love watching him play when he's getting up and down. He has those games where he floats a little, I guess. I guess that's the word.
It's not Andrew Wiggins floating. It's not like disinterest. Like, remember when Andrew Wiggins was in Minnesota and you just catch him kind of idling. I mean, not wanting to be involved, whatever. It's
sometimes
just like
his problem is the other way.
He gets lost in his own head, I think. I think he's overthinking it.
And he's admitted as such.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that I don't think Lonnie knows who he is yet. Just watching him on the court, it doesn't seem like game to game he is completely 100% sure of who he's supposed to be out there still.
It's a big year for him. And that might add to it too. I think he's mentioned earlier this season that, he's sort of trying to control what he can control and blah, 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 all the old cliches. But, he did not get extended last offseason, as our listeners know. And next summer, he's going to have opportunities to play elsewhere. He'll be a restricted free agent. And, I'm not sure if he's proven yet that the Spurs absolutely have to have him back. I'm not sure if he's proven yet that somebody else has to offer him a big deal to take him away. So he's really got a lot riding on these next 4 months or so.
Who was really candid talking about Lonnie was after the Golden State game was DeJounte Murray. Lonnie had that great game at Golden State, which led me to add, it was almost, I even preface to the question, which I know this is a dumb question, but I asked a lot of his teammates, like, why can't you get that Lonnie Walker every night or almost every night or more than once every 5 nights? And DeJounte said it's all in his head. And that's a direct quote from DeJounte. It's in his head. It's in his head.
Yeah.
Like he's got that talent. He's just got to believe that he has that talent. And, if you watch Walker play, sometimes you can see what DeJounte's talking about.
He's a really cerebral.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you there, Tom.
That's all right.
But that almost can work against you in a way. If you're thinking about everything and if you're overanalyzing and you're not just letting the game come to you. All this sounds like century-old coach speak.
Yeah,
gobbledygook. Century-old coach speak for a reason. Like sometimes people overthink things.
Well, he turns 23 on December 14th.
That's the other thing. He's still so young.
One year in college. To be fair, you add that up, and then what we know about his demeanor, his makeup, what you guys have just talked about is maybe sensitivity is the right word. I don't know, but it just adds up to a guy that maybe. I don't know if the Spurs are going to have it, but maybe you just need a little more patience with him.
Yeah.
Yeah. The age thing is a big deal. Like, it seems like he's been around a long time, and he has. This is his 4th year. Yeah. But when you're drafting the Spurs for a long time weren't drafting guys this young. So you forget that a guy, Tim Duncan was 25 when he was here for 4 years.
And then you throw in the 1 year of college.
Yeah. You forget that Lonnie's been here 4 years, but he's only 22 years old. Like, there's a lot of growth that can happen between 22 and 25 and 25 and 27. It's just who's he going to make that? Who's going to pay for that growth? That growth is going to be on what team's dime?
And to be clear, nobody's giving up on him. The Spurs are still playing. This isn't if you want to go back to previous years about guys who people said should have played more. Luka Samanic was one of those guys. Why aren't they playing Luka more? Well, he was a guy that they just realized couldn't play and did not believe in him ever. Not necessarily because it was his fault, just because that promise wasn't there. If they didn't think that Lonnie Walker had promise, if they didn't still have hopes that he can become a part of their future, they wouldn't be playing him now. I mean, they'd be moving on to somebody else. They want to see him succeed, and they're going to give him opportunities to break out and take that step and make that jump over these next 4 months. Like Tom says, he'll still be 23 at the end of this. But the business of the NBA is next summer you have to make a decision on him, and they're going to be watching these 4 months really closely to get as much information as they can. And you want to make the right decision, where even if he hasn't proven that he's a starter yet, that he's
see where this is going,
a huge piece yet. No, I'm not even building there. I'm just saying, it's going to be a tough choice for them. Yeah. And I'm not, I guess
the reason,
the cold business of the NBA is they have to put a dollar amount on it.
Yeah.
And say, we're willing to pay him this amount. If somebody else offers him more, we're not willing to go there. In the past, they've done that with like a Jonathan Simmons and been right.
Yeah.
Gary Neal, whoever.
The reason you don't just completely write him off is because you'll sit there and he'll have a game where he's on the road against the team leading the entire Western Conference and the entire NBA, actually. And he's making them look silly. He's getting to the rim with ease, just layup after layup after layup, couple of 3-pointers. Yeah. So he has those moments every now and then where you just don't want to completely give up on the promise until, it's sort of put up or shut up time where you have to make a decision one way or another. So it will be a tough decision this offseason.
Real quick, and I know we're running out of time, but real quick, at my highly insecure location, shout out to Summer Moon Coffee.
Everywhere I'm at is an insecure location.
Going from the youngsters like Primo and Lonnie to a more mature fellow, our old colleague Mike Monroe came by my highly insecure location. We had a nice chat, and he said to tell all of you guys hello, happy holidays, and look me up. So that's from Mike Monroe.
Well, that's a great thing. I saw Mike Monroe a couple of weeks ago, still doing great, and I think that's a fitting way to bring those to a close.
Every time I'm driving on the highway and I see a silver alert, I give him a call just to see what's up. It reminds me I need to call my old buddy Mikey.
That is abusive. No, it's good to remember who came before us. Mike Monroe paved the way. He never was part of this podcast, but he paved the way for this podcast, much in the same way that Tim Duncan paved the way for young Josh Primo. We can only hope to live up to the legacy of Mike Monroe, like Josh Primo can only hope to live up to the legacy of Tim Duncan. But we will use them as light posts, as beacons to guide our way, to respect the past while looking forward. And that's what I ask of all of you out there in podcast land, to take care of each other and to keep it real.